We would like to draw the attention of American government agencies and the public to what is happening with the Russian media in the U.S. The fact is that they declared war there. Real war. I will definitely tell you about this now, in more detail. First, I would like to say that we suddenly realized that this is not just segregation, and not even just persecution, but real persecution of the Russian media and journalists in the U.S. This fact in terms of information is not known to the general public. That is, all this is happening, but no one in the U.S. knows about it. And, in this regard, we were interested in the opportunity to make this story public, but in a way that it really reached them. And it reached them. Indeed, we have gathered in Moscow in the press center American journalists, heads of bureaus of all American media outlets that are accredited here. And we told them point by point what is happening with their Russian colleagues abroad, primarily in the U.S., against the backdrop of endless statements from Washington that something is wrong with our freedom of speech. They didn't seem to know about it. That is, American journalists who work in Russia had no idea how their Russian colleagues live in the U.S. This is true. They said, but only 2 of the 20 people in the audience said that they heard something like that. The rest did not hear. Is it normal? That is, they, as a rule, know about what is happening on the other side of the earth, not even connected with either Russia or the U.S. And what is happening in their own country in relation to journalists from the country in which they are now, they have no idea. But we told them everything. We told them, but in order to make the effects stronger, we said that if this does not stop in the U.S., we will begin to do the same with respect to American journalists in Russia. Nobody liked it, as far as I can see. But it's wonderful. It's great when people who come up with new executions have the opportunity to feel their effect once on themselves. So we, as we thought, conveyed this information to its intended purpose. So far, we have not heard any constructive proposals. Time has gone. If the State Department in Washington, in the White House, where they come up with all this persecution, does not change their minds about persecuting and destroying the Russian media and Russian journalists, then we, accordingly, naturally, will act proportionately. We are surprised that Mr. Ned Price said the following, direct quote, "The U.S. continues to issue visas to professional Russian journalists. None of the Russian journalists working in the U.S. had their accreditation withdrawn from the Foreign Media Center," end quote. They probably don't know. Mr. Price, I am addressing you personally. We know each other. We met during the negotiations. Well, unfortunately, you are misleading the public. The fact is that Russian journalists have big problems with American visas. This is first. But let me tell you more. The fact is that the U.S. Treasury, the Treasury of your country, Mr. Price, has imposed sanctions on Russia One, First, and NTV TV channels. It turns out that after all, there are restrictions on the Russian media. Or how? This is from the category of rhetorical questions. But no, it's a practical matter. Mr. Price, you have deceived the world audience a little. I think everyone should know the truth. Here it is. The Russian mass media and journalists in the U.S. have created unbearable conditions for the existence of their professional and economic activities. Visas of the corresponding categories are not issued, and without them, accreditations are not issued or extended. Perhaps, to some journalists whom you consider correct and necessary, perhaps you do all this for them. But, for the most part, Russian journalists, unfortunately, face enormous difficulties in obtaining and renewing American visas. They cannot return to Russia in order to resolve their work issues, on vacation, and so on. Because without an extended visa, they will not be able to return to the US in order to continue working there. And you know this very well. Corporate and personal bank accounts are not open for them. I hope the State Department finds out about this, at least now. And those bank accounts that were previously opened by correspondent offices are blocked for journalists. Transfers to and from Russia are severely restricted. Mr. Price, how do you think they get paid? If their accounts are blocked, ask yourself this question. Your American journalists are paid, and they can pay for housing, cars. They can rent the necessary equipment. They can buy food for now. For now. If you do not do something to unblock the situation with Russian journalists and the media, then we will take similar measures against your American journalists. Now about broadcasting. The distribution of broadcast signals, broadcasts on the internet, is also not only difficult, but sometimes simply impossible for Russia. Local contractors are urgently under pressure from US government agencies, and, of course, without explaining the reasons. They are also forbidden to announce the reasons. They are terminating contracts for the provision of services, for renting premises, and land plots with our media. Their counterparts in third countries are also targeted. They are directly threatened with secondary sanctions just because, Mr. Price, they are cooperating with the Russians. In addition, our journalists are under constant pressure from the American intelligence services, which we have repeatedly spoken about, but perhaps your journalists do not tell you about this, or your embassy is not working. The same applies to their family members. If you forgot, or deliberately did not begin to talk about Russia Today, then I will remind you of this. In March, the activities of the Russia Today America TV channel were terminated. All accounts on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter were blocked. And sites and Google recommendation services are also inaccessible. The RT app has been removed from the Apple Store, Google Store, and Smart TV. Do you want to say that it is the private operators themselves who have decided this? It's a lie. We know how much instruction, valuable direction, and direct pressure the US government has on private companies. Well, we see it in the situation with US economic operators in our country. Therefore, it is not necessary to deny the obvious. In general, if all of the above for you, Mr. Price, is the norm, and not a fundamental violation of the principle of freedom of the media, in fact, this is just barbarism, which is aimed at cleaning the media space from an alternative opinion, then consider that we have heard it. And, in this case, similar conditions will be created for the American media and their representatives in Russia. You don't think it's something special, do you? So, it's up to you.
Dear friends, if you like this video, please subscribe, like and write a comment. This will greatly help the development of this channel. Thank you.